Welcome back, everyone, to another installment from AMPro Engineering. In this episode of the My Car series, we're going to talk about my second Tyco Bandit. Now, many of you who are not new to this channel have seen the 10-part series, my apologies, on the full restoration of this vehicle. But what I might not have gotten into detail about was why exactly this vehicle needed such a restoration. I'm not going to be presenting any photographs and all that. All of the imagery of this vehicle before is in the build series. First one is linked up right there. So if you've got a few hours to kill, have a good time. What I want to talk about right now is just a brief history of this particular Tyco Bandit and why it looks the way it does. So this again was Bandit number 2. Bandit number 1 we already did an installment of the My Car series on right here. Both of these vehicles came from the same home. This was a kid named Ben that I went to school with in grade school. And after purchasing number 1 and having this thing absolutely fall apart, because I don't know what was wrong with Ben growing up, but he just vigorously abused this vehicle. And then he offered me the replacement of the vigorously abused first Bandit. This was in no better shape, an absolute travesty, but it was better than Bandit number 1. Now, Bandit number 2 over here had no front shock tower. In the video for this Bandit, I showed you a small eraser, this eraser right here, which I had jammed carefully between the lower control arm and the body. So there was another one as well, but that one had long since deteriorated. So that's what the front suspension was. It was just a piece of eraser. And the comedy was, on this truck here, there was another eraser that was the rear suspension on this vehicle here. So I just noticed my shock was a little misaligned there. So yeah, this truck had an eraser in the back, and this truck had an eraser in the front. Now, it didn't stop there. Here's the original front control arm with wheels still attached. That, yeah, that's just kind of how they all were. I don't know what that kid did to these cars. They did run electrically. They ran fine. Both of them did, in fact. This car's gearbox was still, it's actually the original gearbox. It runs fine. It always did. I've always found that the second generation Bandits with the differential fared better than the first gen without the diff, but I digress. So yeah, here's the original front suspension. And yeah, so I drove this car for years and years and years. It was always the tow truck for my RC10. I had a small horse trailer from a Barbie or something that my buddy had, and I hitched it up to the back of this car. Now, I have the hitch, but it's not on this car because I did replace all the roll bars and all that with AMPro units, but it did have a rear bumper, and here is the hitch. In fact, it wasn't just the hitch, it was also this little back tailgate. So, I don't know, for those of you who didn't grow up in 1989, a lot of trucks had back off, usually on the mudguard. And then I'm not going to bring up what these are supposed to represent. And here you do see RC10, and right there it does say Bandit. My grandpa made me this. As well as a couple other parts, but this was there because I always put batteries back here. So I would tow the RC10 with spare batteries and all that junk in the back of the Bandit and take it to the school where I would drive it. So this truck ended up seeing just as much use once I got the RC10 and the Hornet as it did prior, because I was using it for something else. I drove it for probably, another 10, 15 years. And it just started to just fall apart. You know, the mounts for the roll bar onto the electronics cover, which holds the whole thing together, those all broke. I do have the original roll bar right here. You can see it right there. This rear bumper is actually from the first Bandit. Everything else is AMPro product. Now, many, many years passes, and I decided to do the full restoration the way that I had always envisioned this. Now, there is a Tamiya King Cab build in RC Car Action that I kind of modeled this after. Part of that had to do with when I was in maybe 4th grade or so. I was at my school after hours, and I was in the playground on the swings. Some kid walks by, and I've got this parked over there, and he starts asking me about it. Remember that in the 1990s, these Tyco Bandits were extremely popular. So everybody knew what they were. And I was telling him that at home I had one that was orange. It had all working lights, which this one does now. Every single light on this vehicle is fully operational. It had all these upgrades, really good suspension, and blah, 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 blah. You know, whatever else a third or fourth grader is going to spout. Well, technically, I wasn't lying. It was just that fourth dimensional aspect of what I was telling that kid that was slightly out of sync. So fast forward probably 30 years and here we are. So kid from the field at my elementary school that I met while on the swings. See, I told you I had this at home. So all the tires on this car are actually original and they're surprisingly pliable. Although I think the reason for that is I have been applying a product from Adams Polishes called VRT for around 20 years. So yes, pliable, also slippery. Now, this spare tire is not pliable. This has turned into some sort of new material that hasn't existed before in the natural world. So we just won't touch that. Coming around back here, you can kind of see very briefly how I attached the shocks. They're actually installed upside down, and I have a 3D printed bracket that clamps onto the Bandit's factory stud. On this side, we're going to see something a little different. This is an aluminum, I have no idea what it is. It's an aluminum piece of scrap that my grandfather, 30-something, probably more than that, years ago, fashioned to repair this spring. As you can see, it attaches in the exact same way. The shock is upside down. And I didn't bother repairing his repair because this is potentially one of the most important repairs that I have on anything he's ever made. Now, I have a lot of things that he's made, and this is probably one of my favorites. So no, it will never be touched. This is way more repaired than I could have ever dreamt of doing. This is an incredibly important car. In fact, both of them really are. I know Bandit number 1 isn't particularly attractive, but you know, this kind of denotes a particular phase of my youth. And then this kind of shows what I always wanted to do to the Tyco Bandit. So I'm very proud of actually, you know, I'm proud of both of them. Although this one, I mean, this build probably took, 2 or 3 nights. I mean, it was nothing. So 6 or 7 hours here, whereas this was definitely a great deal of time, effort, engineering, and love, and I am absolutely thrilled about it. You know, it's obviously not a shelfer, right? I didn't go to the effort of finding new old stock, you know, transmission and bumpers and battery doors. No. This car's got a story to tell. You know, it does have a double wishbone front suspension, which this guy, you know, doesn't. It does have oil-filled shocks at all 4 corners. It has an upgraded electronic system, which this guy also does. But I just decided to go a little bit more insane with this, do the little fogged-in demarcation line here with the lavender and the red and the kind of tangerine and orange. Just super, super 1990s mini truck, because it is a 1990s mini truck. So my friends, this is my amazing Tyco Bandit number 2, and I hope you liked this installment of the My Car series with 2 of what I believe are the most important radio-controlled cars in radio-controlled car history. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.